Dr. Amy. We're back with another Tuesday tip. This month we're talking about homocysteine, but kind of peripheral to the homocysteine conversation, I want to talk about blood testing that you can do through your conventional MD for MTHFR. Not specifically to test if you have the gene, but to test kind of the consequences, right? Where you are on your MTHFR journey. Sadly, there is not a lot. Unfortunate. So there are blood tests for folate. The most commonly used one is called a serum folate or just folate, right? And they measure levels of folate of all forms in the serum, which is the liquid part around your blood cells. This is not a hugely useful test, I hate to say. It is useful information if it turns up as low, because then we know you have an overt folate deficiency. But, and so that's useful, right? Like that's actually valid, useful information. But for many, many MTHFR folks, what I actually see is that folate tests extra high, right? And so people are like, oh yay, I'm not folate deficient, except that they have symptoms that with MTHFR we associate with folate deficiency. Anxiety, depression, repeat miscarriages, whatever, right? Like they're having trouble. So what we need to see in that instance is the limitation of this test, which is that it tests all forms of folate. And for many of us, the most common form that we've been exposed to over the years through food, through like normal dietary supplements, through birth control pills, through whatever, is folic acid, which we have talked about before, but MTHFR folks just don't utilize properly, right? We do not utilize folic acid to any beneficial degree, and in the research it has actually been shown to increase something called a pseudo-MTHFR deficiency, right? So high levels of folic acid in the blood will create something that mimics MTHFR, which if you already have MTHFR is the last thing you need, right? So lots of this folate that shows up on blood tests, especially when they're high, is actually folic acid that's just rattling around, not doing anything. And what we call this is unmetabolized folic acid, or UMFA. UMFA has been linked to a lot of different health risks. I mean, risk of autism spectrum in women who are having babies, right? So those babies born to women with high UMFA levels end up having a higher risk of autism. Food sensitivities, weirdly, right? Some allergic conditions. We're seeing all these weird sort of risks. Plus, UMFA's been linked to higher risk of cancer growth, blah, blah, blah. So we don't want this, right? So in MTHFR, when you test those folate levels, a lot of times you see this really crazy high number come back, which is not a good thing, right? It's not a reliable thing. That doesn't tell you how much functional folate you have. It just tells you how many folate-like things are floating around, potentially clogging up the works. So folate test, in my opinion, is not a great way to measure. Now, it should still be done because, again, if we see that really low number, okay, we need to supplement. We need to supplement an MTHFR safe form of folate, preferably methylfolate if you tolerate it. But if we see the really high number come back, usually what that means is A, you've got MTHFR, and B, you've got a whole lot of unconverted folic acid rattling around in there that's useless and kind of gumming up the works. B12 is actually a very useful blood test and is reasonably accurate, I think, because there aren't as many sort of functionless forms of B12, right? We don't see that risk with high B12. So with B12, we do actually use that number. If you do see a really high level of B12, especially if you're not supplementing, then sometimes that means there's a bit of a conversion problem downstream. Like we might be looking at an MTR or MTRR issue, but that's a separate thing. So, in my opinion, the most useful blood test for people with an MTHFR deficiency is homocysteine, because that actually tells us how well that methionine cycle, which MTHFR is a part of, is spinning, right? And that's where we're seeing methylation. That's where we're seeing really the good stuff that we want to see with a functioning MTHFR. And if the good stuff isn't happening, right, that SAMe isn't being made, we're not getting our methyl donors, then what we see is homocysteine starting to build up. So in last week's video, we talked about optimal numbers versus normal numbers, right? Normal goes from 5 to 15 micromoles per liter. What I'm saying is optimal, especially for MTHFR folks, is in that 6 to 9 range. So by far, the best blood metric that we have for MTHFR function and methylation is homocysteine. Okay, Tuesday tip. Bye, guys.